we did have fun talking about the latest news that happened in animation this week, let me just go ahead and ask you guys a little something. You didn't think that I would walk away in this episode without even mentioning about the biggest night in Hollywood, the Academy Awards. Yes, I decided to go ahead and save the biggest news story for last, which is about the 90th Annual Academy Awards and the winners that have been presented there. Now, for longtime viewers of my YouTube channel, you may recall that what I would do every year is that I would go and make a separate vlog on my channel where I would go and discuss about my thoughts on the entirety of the Oscars during that specific year. Like what I think about the winners, what I think about the animated winners, and also about the show itself. Well, I decided for this year I'm going to change things up a bit, and I'm actually going to go ahead and save it for here in the animation podcast. Now, there isn't really much of a difference between what I would normally do in the vlogs and what I'm about to do now. The only thing that will be different is just the way that I am presenting them right now. So, with all that said, what I'm about to do here is that I will be expressing my thoughts on 3 different things that happened during that night. I will start things off by talking about the animated winners, since this is the animation podcast. Then I will discuss about the other winners at the Oscars this year. And then finally, I will go ahead and talk about my thoughts on the show, like the whole presentation and all that kind of stuff, and all the weird, crazy events that did occur at the Oscars this year. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get things started and talk about the animated winners that occurred this year. And I'll start things off by talking about Best Animated Short. And this year, the big winner is Dear Basketball. Now, I have previously talked about this a lot in the animation podcast for those of you who would be longtime listeners of the show. And as you may know, one thing I always describe about Dear Basketball is that this is the combining forces of 3 masters of their own field. You got NBA All-Star Kobe Bryant bringing in his poem. You got master animator Glenn Keane, who has created some of the most memorable characters during the Disney Renaissance, like Aladdin, the Beast, Tarzan, and many more. And then you also got composing legend John Williams. Like, you got all of those 3 people bringing in John Williams' music, Glenn Keane's animation, and Kobe Bryant's poem, formed that, and you pretty much got Dear Basketball, which won for Best Animated Short. The other shorts that were nominated this year includes Garden Party, Pixar's Lou, Negative Space, and Revolting Rhymes. Now, this year, I will have to mention that for the animated shorts, it is actually very interesting because they each bring something very unique into the table animation-wise, at least in terms of their visuals. Like, for example, with Dear Basketball, you got the rough hand-drawn animation of Glenn Keane. And then when you look at Garden Party, that one would offer hyper-realistic CGI. Then you got Lou, and you got the creative uses of random objects in order to morph a character into different shapes. And then you also got Negative Space, which is more of a surreal use of stop motion. And then you got Revolting Rhymes, which is literally a children's storybook coming to life. Like, you take the classic illustrations that would be commonly used in Roald Dahl books, and they would go bring them to life, like animate them, turn them into computer animation, in order to go and form this creative and unique tale of Revolting Rhymes. And honestly, I am actually very glad that Dear Basketball actually won for Best Animated Short. For me personally, I was really rooting for either Lou or Dear Basketball to win. And I will say, as an animation fan, it's about time that Glenn Keane finally got a godforsaken Oscar. Now, I do understand that for most people, they would feel very opinionated and they would have strong feelings for the fact that Dear Basketball would actually win, and that is mainly for the factor of Kobe Bryant. And this is especially true for basketball fans. Rather, if you do like Kobe Bryant or not, I'm sure for basketball fans, they would feel something very strongly about the fact that Kobe Bryant is now an Oscar winner on top of his many different awards that he got during his basketball career. So, with all that said, yeah, like I said before, I am very glad that Dear Basketball actually did get the Oscar win this year for Best Animated Short. It really is something that is well deserved, especially with Glenn Keane's beautiful animation. And on top of that, like, you do have a nice score by John Williams and also a very touching poem from Kobe Bryant about his love for basketball, and also that it is, in a way, a message about following your dreams and never giving up, because, like, you could start out as a kid who dreams of being something big, and then you do end up being something big, but it won't last long. And, like, in a way, this is Kobe Bryant's way of saying thank you for making a kid's dream come true. So, yeah, it is very touching, but this is not to undermine the other Oscar-nominated shorts as well. Lou is one of the more creative Pixar shorts. They did a very good job there. Definitely better than the movie that it presented with. And also, I do appreciate Revolting Rhymes. That is actually a really nice short, and it's a very good adaptation of Roald Dahl's book. Definitely a lot of fun. I would also say Garden Party is also worth watching, not just because of the hyper-realistic animation, but also that there is kind of a hidden story within it, and it does have some interesting twists and turns. So you like it's like the kind of short that it looks like you just see a bunch of frogs going around into some crazy shenanigans, but there is actually a dark story that's incorporated into it. So yeah, all these animated shorts, they did a good job, but I would say Dear Basketball definitely is the winner that did deserve it. So, with all that said, let us go ahead and now move on to Best Animated Feature. And probably nobody is surprised by this, but yes, Pixar's Coco ended up being the winner, where it managed to grab the award from the other nominees, which includes The Breadwinner, The Boss Baby, Ferdinand, and Loving Vincent. And for me, I would say that I am really glad that Coco won. And yeah, I know that there might be some people out there that could be a little bit upset because, yes, once again, like many years or most of the years during the Oscars when they have Best Animated Feature, it is a Pixar film that won. But honestly, with that said, I want to go ahead and ask you guys this one big question about Coco's win. And honestly, who else would have gotten it? Let's be honest, because for this year, Coco didn't really have much contest. You know what I mean? And I know I have already expressed my thoughts before regarding the other animated films that did get nominated this year. And yeah, like many people, I was a bit upset that out of all the animated films released, The Boss Baby and Ferdinand somehow got themselves a nomination. And I've already said my piece about those movies, and even to this day, I still feel like The Boss Baby and Ferdinand do not deserve to get that Oscar nomination, nor does it deserve to even get that kind of reputation. In fact, in a way, that Oscar nomination kind of makes things worse for those movies. Like, right now, it's starting to become this massive joke about the fact that The Boss Baby, out of all things, actually got an Oscar nomination. In a way, it's a lot like how people would joke about Suicide Squad last year, how that actually won the Oscar. Now, thank God The Boss Baby didn't actually win, but honestly, those films getting an Oscar nomination, it's more of a curse than it actually is a blessing. And honestly, if they did not get that Oscar nomination, then people would just move on, and honestly, things would be probably okay for those animated films. Like, they wouldn't have, like, this much backlash over it. You know what I mean? And on top of that, there is also the independent animated features, and we do have some interesting choices right over here. Well, technically, I've stated before that the entire list itself of the nominees is just a copy-paste from what happened to the Golden Globes, but we do also have The Breadwinner and Loving Vincent. Now, it's interesting to mention about Loving Vincent, because that one, I am highly aware that it does have a fan base that absolutely adores Loving Vincent. Like, whenever that subject or that movie would be brought up, people would fall in love with the movie. They would say it's like one of the best things that they have ever seen. And seeing the film myself, I will say that I do agree that when it comes to Loving Vincent, it does have some of the best animation and some of the most revolutionary animation in recent years, considering how literally every frame is a work of art. It's literally a painting. And the way that they have done it, it's actually quite incredible with the amount of effort that has been put into that animated film. However, as a film critic, one thing that I have learned about animated features is that great animation does not make a great movie. And that definitely is the case with Loving Vincent, because even though as amazing as the animation is in that film, the writing and the script, it's a little bit of a mess, to be honest. It really did need some work in there. And the thing with Loving Vincent, it's just that the story is a little bit messed up. It's confusing and repetitive. And also, it is so hard to find even one likable character in the film. Like, honestly, the best way to summarize the story of Loving Vincent is that you got this douchebag in a yellow suit who is asking other douchebags about what happened to this one mentally ill douchebag that killed himself. Yes, even Vincent van Gogh is pretty much a douche in this. So really, there's no likable character here. Everybody is kind of mean-spirited and a jerk to each other in a way. And also, on top of that, the story itself, like I just said, it is very repetitive but also confusing. There isn't a lot of answers that have been brought up, or there isn't a lot of questions that have been answered, is what I mean. And you can tell that there is this very specific formula that it would keep following again and again and again, where the dude in the yellow suit, he would ask someone about what happened to Vincent van Gogh. Then the interviewee would give the guy in the yellow suit something to drink. And then the interviewee would tell his side of the story about what's up with Vincent, or what that person knew about Vincent van Gogh. And this would just keep going on and on and on. And overall, like, I kind of realized that Loving Vincent, in terms of the story and the characters that have been brought up, it really is the poor man's version of LA Noire. So, yeah, honestly, I do understand why Loving Vincent deserves to get a nomination, but there was absolutely no way that it would win. But then you got The Breadwinner. And the thing with The Breadwinner is that that's probably the only film in that entire category that is actually legitimate competition against Coco. And the thing with The Breadwinner is that it really is a well-crafted film. The people at Cartoon Saloon and director Nora Twomey did a phenomenal job, or Nora Toomey, I would say. I think that's how you pronounce it. But anyways, they did such an incredible job with The Breadwinner. But I will say that experiencing The Breadwinner in general, it really is a 3-hour experience, because you need 90 minutes to go and watch the movie, and then afterwards you need another 90 minutes just to recollect your emotions, because this is the kind of film that, even though, like, there are some happy moments in there, it will leave you as an emotional wreck. Like, I am dead serious. This is really such a heavy film. A really good film. But it definitely is the kind where I know a whole bunch of people who would go and watch The Breadwinner, and they will come out going, "Oh my god!" Like, I know, like, with me, like, I just needed some time to just breathe after watching The Breadwinner. Again, very well done, but a really heavy film. So honestly, overall, with the best animated feature category this year, really, it was just a competition between The Breadwinner and Coco. And honestly, with the way that the Academy works, it is extremely rare, or like it happens only once in a lifetime, that they would actually recognize an independent animated feature or a foreign animated feature in general and give the award to them. In fact, honestly, the only two animated features that I can think of that are not from a major American animation studio would be Spirited Away and also Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit. And even that is a little bit iffy, with Wallace and Gromit, because technically that one was actually distributed by DreamWorks Animation. So honestly, yeah, the thing is with Coco, like, is it really predictable that Coco won? Yes. But comparing to all the other movies that have been nominated, did it deserve it? Absolutely. I mean, for me, I feel like it was only a competition against The Breadwinner and Coco, but I am definitely glad that Coco actually did win the Oscar. But surprisingly enough, even though that Coco winning Best Animated Feature surprised no one, what Coco did to surprise people is actually winning its second Oscar, and that actually is for Best Original Song. Now, Coco actually had some pretty tough competition there, and it wasn't easy to determine which one would be the big winner. Like, apparently, Coco's Remember Me was up against Mudbound's Mighty River. It was also against Call Me By Your Name's Mystery of Love. It was also against Marshall's Stand Up For Something. And it was also against Greatest Showman's This Is Me. And I knew that there were a lot of people that were pretty iffy regarding like who would be the winner. Some people, in fact, most people that I know were pretty much predicting that This Is Me would actually be the big winner, considering that that's the song that pretty much is the big hit that you would hear on the radio all the time. And if I could be very honest with This Is Me, this is actually the first time that I've heard of This Is Me in general. Not like, I don't mean like this is the first time I've heard of the idea of This Is Me or anything like that. I've heard of it before, but I mean like to actually hear the song itself. The first time I did it was actually in the Oscars. And for me, I just feel like it's just, like, honestly, I don't see the point of that actually getting nominated, or actually getting nominated, like, throughout all the award shows and stuff like that, because from what I've heard with This Is Me, it's just, like, your typical, your typical bland pop song where the theme is, like, oh, be yourself, be anything but normal, and all that kind of stuff. Like, a lot of people are trying to say that, oh, it is the anthem for weirdness, it is the anthem of uniqueness and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, I'm just standing there thinking that Disney might have had several songs about being yourself and to stand out from the crowd, and those ones would be much better. Honestly, for me, there really isn't anything special about This Is Me, and considering that it is from the same songwriters of La La Land, it didn't really surprise me that it didn't come out that well, or the execution of it isn't really all that good. But overall, yeah, like with Best Original Song, there definitely is some stiff competition there. It was pretty tough. Like, there are some strong songs that really do encompass about protesting and to standing up for your rights. In fact, there really is one song that's literally called Stand Up For Something. And there's also another really good one, Mighty River. So, honestly, it was tough to really know, but I really am glad that Remember Me actually did win. And I can see how that it actually became a winner, because Remember Me is the kind of song that you can use it in any way you want. There are many different ways to interpret Remember Me. Something that you can use it to be somber. You can use it as something festive. You can use it as something that's calming. Any way that you can use it, it actually does work. And I feel like with Coco, it really does work out well for the movie, especially the fact that it does play a key factor onto the film. So I really am happy that Coco actually did win for Best Original Song. So yeah, overall, there's not much of a surprise that yes, Coco did come out with an Oscar, but it really is nice that it is a two-time Oscar winner. You know, it's always great to see an animated project coming out with more than just one Oscar from Best Animated Feature. That is always great to see. So, with all that said and done, let's go ahead and talk about the other winners outside of animation. And I might as well start things off by talking about the big winner, and that was honestly quite a surprise, which is actually Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water. Now, honestly, I was shocked that it came out as the ultimate winner of this year's Oscars, considering that when you look at the previous years, where you look at the 2015 movies and the 2016 movies, you notice there is a little bit of a pattern where there's always that one movie that would win the most Oscars, but then you have the one small movie that would walk away with a few Oscars, maybe like 2 or 3, and then it would go out with Best Picture. Like, it happened with Spotlight, and it happened with Moonlight. But with The Shape of Water, I was expecting that that would be the one that would walk out with the most Oscars, considering that it has a huge amount of nominations. And then right afterwards, you got something like 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri to be the one to walk out with Best Picture, along with Best Actress for Frances McDormand for her performance in the movie. Now, I was expecting that, but that isn't the case. In fact, The Shape of Water didn't really win as much Oscars as I thought. It only won 4 of them, where it actually won for Best Original Score, it won for Best Production Design, it won for Best Directing for Guillermo del Toro. That's probably the one that is the easiest to predict. And then it won for Best Picture. And honestly, I could not be more proud for Guillermo del Toro to actually get that. I really am happy for him, considering that I definitely am a Guillermo del Toro fan. I really do love his works, whether it be like the Hellboy movies or Pan's Labyrinth, or even like some of the animated stuff that he worked with DreamWorks Animation, where he was an executive producer for some films like Puss in Boots, Kung Fu Panda 2, Rise of the Guardians, and I definitely love Troll Hunters. That is such an awesome series right there. And I'm glad to see that he really is getting some massive recognition, and now his legacy is starting to become greater than what anybody could expect. Not only is he an Oscar-winning director for what he did with The Shape of Water, but now he's also known as a director for a Best Picture film with The Shape of Water. And I have seen The Shape of Water myself, and it really is such a nice movie. I actually got a press screening thanks to Film Book, and it really is beautiful, and it was executed very, very well. Now, I know I could have a bit of criticisms with the movie where I feel like the story is a little bit familiar, and it has been used before, and I do feel like there are some strong parallels with the Iron Giant, especially with the villain. But honestly, when it comes to The Shape of Water, it is very well done. It does feel like a powerful movie, and the performances are amazing. Like, I definitely do applaud Sally Hawkins' work for what she did in The Shape of Water, where it really required a lot out of her, considering that she has to be mute. Now, you think it would be a little bit easier because she couldn't talk. No, 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 no. She has to use her body in order to express how she feels, and trust me, like, you definitely can relate to her and feel where she is going with when she would meet up with the fish monster. So it definitely is a nice film and a great film. And yeah, like, you know, it actually is nice that it did win Best Picture. But on top of that, there are also a lot of big winners as well. Dunkirk actually walked off with 3 of them, where it won for Best Film Editing, and it won for both sound awards for Best Sound Mixing and Best Sound Editing. And yeah, I will admit that it did do a great job on it, but there is one thing I have to complain about with Dunkirk when it comes to the sound. My God, I remember seeing it back in theaters. It was loud. That's the one thing about Dunkirk, is that it was a very loud movie. Believe it or not, I had some warnings from my friends. So it may sound crazy, but I actually walked in wearing earmuffs. And yeah, some may think that, oh, when you wear earmuffs, you won't hear much of the movie. No, 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 no. With the volume of Dunkirk, they put it up to freaking 11, and I can hear just fine, honestly. Like, there were a few moments I wanted to test out, like, okay, like, what does it sound like? Okay, put it back in. I think I'll be okay with this. But yeah, no, like, they did a very good job despite the volume, but yeah, Dunkirk really did some great work in there in terms of some of its filmmaking. And then there is also, of course, Darkest Hour, where it got 2 awards for Best Makeup and Best Actor for Gary Oldman. So this definitely was a moment where Winston Churchill had a time to shine in terms of the performance by Gary Oldman, which honestly, his win is a little bit like Leonardo DiCaprio with The Revenant, where like Gary Oldman is one of those actors, like, he finally got the Oscar for Best Actor, and the public would just say, well, final freaking Lee, it's about time that he got one. And also for Best Makeup, to making him look like Winston Churchill, because Gary Oldman is not a large guy. He is actually pretty skinny, and then you see the images of Winston Churchill in Darkest Hour, and yeah, that was one heck of a transformation that they did there. And then there is also Blade Runner 2049, which I get the feeling that the Oscars is trying to say that apparently Blade Runner 2049 is the best visual-looking movie out there, since it actually did win not just Best Cinematography, but also for Best Visual Effects. Now, I will admit personally, I do feel like it is the most disappointing win in terms of the Oscars this year, at least for me. Because the thing is, for Best Visual Effects, I was really rooting for War of the Planet of the Apes. For me, War of the Planet of the Apes has to be probably my favorite movie of 2017. I'm already a fan of the recent Planet of the Apes trilogy, and the third one is absolutely phenomenal. Like what Toy Story 3 did to the Toy Story trilogy, War of the Planet of the Apes did to the recent Planet of the Apes trilogy. It really is phenomenal, very well written, and the visuals are absolutely phenomenal. They did such an amazing job in there. And honestly, it is a bit disappointing that it didn't win an Oscar or didn't get too much, like a whole bunch of recognition. At least it did walk away with the Annie. But I will say that I'm not going to complain too much about it. I'm not going to say anything, like, I don't have anything against Blade Runner 2049 because, I'll be honest, I have yet to see the film. And considering that it did win 2 Oscars, maybe it would be worth watching just to see what the visuals has done. But I do need to try to find the time for it, though, because honestly, the thing is, I know for a fact that Blade Runner 2049 is a godforsaken long movie. I think it's even longer than Star Wars The Last Jedi, going, I think, like, I think it's, like, between 2.5 hours and 3 hours, so I probably would need to find the time, but then again, I think it would be important that I would check out Blade Runner 2049, considering that most of the visual effects are done in Montreal, and as a Montrealer myself, I do need to support my local visual effects artists and animators, you know what I mean? So, yeah, that is interesting. But there is actually one that I do have to mention that is probably the biggest surprise, and the biggest pleasant surprise, other than Shape of Water winning Best Picture. It would have to be Best Original Screenplay, which was actually given to Get Out by Jordan Peele. And Get Out was definitely a strong movie, and really overall, Get Out really was an unexpected surprise, because we're talking about a Blumhouse movie by Jordan Peele. And it came out with such a strong message related to race relations and all that stuff. And now we see Jordan Peele actually winning the Oscar. And you know, I mentioned not too long ago how Jordan Peele decided to be a full-on director and filmmaker and quit acting in general because of the poor treatment that Sony has given to him when offering the role of the poop emoji in the Emoji Movie. And yeah, honestly, it really is for the best, actually, considering that now Jordan Peele is a legitimate Oscar-winning filmmaker. And honestly, I could not wish him more the best for his filmmaking career at this point. It really is awesome to see Get Out actually walking away with an Oscar, and a big Oscar at that. We're talking about Best Writing over here, Best Original Writing per se. So honestly, that is a pleasant surprise right there. Other winners that we got, well, I will say that when it comes to the Best Actors and Best Actresses, those ones were really predictable. In fact, I would even say that it is possibly one of the most predictable Best Actor and Best Actress categories that I've seen in a while. And this is, like, some could even debate that it could be as predictable as Best Animated Feature, because like, you do see the patterns from other award shows, and yeah, like, you do end up with the same winners. Gary Oldman won for Best Actor for Darkest Hour. Frances McDormand won for Best Actress in 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Sam Rockwell won for Best Actor in a Supporting Role for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And Allison Janney won for Best Actress in a Supporting Role for I, Tonya. Yeah, that is kind of predictable, and considering that when you see the patterns, of course it's going to affect the Oscars as well. But then you also do have Best Costume Design for Phantom Thread, which honestly, that one is another predictable one, because you're literally talking about a movie about costume design, so of course it would win the Oscar for costume design. I mean, it really does emphasize one thing, so it would fit into that category right there. Are there other ones? Honestly, I'm not too familiar with the live-action shorts or the documentary features, so I can't really put my commentary onto that, or even the foreign language film, so there's nothing that I can really say there personally, but yeah, I think, oh, well, technically there is also Call Me By Your Name for Best Adapted Screenplay. That is actually very nice, and considering how Call Me By Your Name is a big contender this year at the Oscars, it's not that surprising that that one would actually go ahead and win the Oscar. So yeah, I think we pretty much covered all the winners. Now let us go ahead and move on to the show itself, how things worked out on stage and with Jimmy Kimmel and all that stuff. Now, before I continue, though, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a warning. Just to let you know, guys, that I will be discussing about some serious subject matter and talk about some social issues. I will be getting a little bit into some, excuse me, I will be getting into a little bit of political subject matter, like sexual harassment, with gun control, and all that kind of stuff. I will be discussing about those things, so if you're not a fan of hearing anybody talking about politics or anything like that, then maybe it's the time that you can back off right now. And please take this warning for granted. Please consider this warning very well, because it is not every day that I give you guys a warning that I am about to express an opinion. And I mean, it really is sad nowadays that we have to do something like that. I mean, there are times when even I feel like in my reviews, I have to put out a warning sign saying, "Warning, I'm about to express my opinion on an animated film. Viewers' discretion is advised." Okay. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the show itself. And honestly, I would have to say that overall, I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't really do anything special. Like, honestly, this is more of your generic award show presentation. Like, honestly, with the Oscars, usually they would be known to really put on such a grand show. But in here, they didn't really do much. And honestly, I was a bit disappointed as well that Jimmy Kimmel didn't really do much as well. Like, honestly, last year, Jimmy Kimmel was absolutely awesome. He was definitely great and brought out one of the most entertaining Oscar shows in recent years. And we've had a blast, and he was absolutely hilarious delivering jokes about the recent films and slamming on Trump and the GOP and all that kind of stuff. Now, I will say with Jimmy Kimmel, of course, he is still funny this year, and he did have a lot of funny moments and some good jabs onto the GOP and stuff like that. But he didn't really do that much. It didn't really feel like he was really a host. It was more like he was just there. And of course, considering that he is a late night talk show host, of course you would have those little moments where there would be some late night talk show moments. Like, there's this running gag about a jet ski that if you would have the shortest acceptance speech, then you would actually go and win a jet ski. And then also, if there's also another one where some celebrities decided to go into the theater next door because there was a sneak preview for A Wrinkle in Time, and they decided to come in and give out some snacks and stuff like that. So, honestly, it was a bit underwhelming. Like, they did do the best they can with it. A lot of great jokes came out of there, especially one that I do remember that Jimmy Kimmel mentioned that, okay, instead of doing the little song, we're just gonna bring this guy in, and you see the guy from Get Out actually, like, just running in going, "Get out! Get out! Get out!" Like, admittedly, that was actually pretty funny and a great comedic use of Get Out, so that was definitely a lot of fun right there. But yeah, I will say that I was a bit disappointed that they really didn't do much, especially the fact that it is the 90th Academy Awards. That was a bit disappointing that they really laid low onto it. The only thing that they've done that really was special is just the montages. Like, you just see a bunch of montages for different movies. I mean, it was a little bit cool to see, like, different montages for Best Actor and for Best Supporting Actor and Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress and all that kind of stuff, but really, you could do that in any Oscars and it wouldn't be that much different. And really, the only thing that does emphasize that really does emphasize the fact that it is the 90th Oscars is that you got this, like, in the middle of the show, you got this one big montage showing, like, all the different movies that got recognized at the Oscars and stuff like that. So, really, it didn't deliver that much, and it was a bit disappointing. But I will say, I guess, there is a bit of a reason. You could argue that there is a bit of an explanation why they didn't want to make it so extravagant, and that is because they want to have a bit of a more, like, they want to have some time to mention about the social issues that are currently going on. One thing that is absolutely unavoidable is the movements against sexual harassment, like Time's Up or #MeToo, and all those things. Honestly, I was expected that they would bring that up a lot, but honestly, not really. Like, any of the social issues, like, they do get brought up a little bit, but at the most, they kind of got shout-outs. Pretty much mentioning things that, like, any real American or any real mentally functioning human being would go and support. Like, fighting for feminism, pretty much standing up for the Parkland students to support them on their way. To have a demand for strict gun control, to take down the NRA and other far-right terrorist groups that would support mass shootings, and all that kind of stuff. Like, they would mention about fighting for equality, fighting for gun control, and fighting for all that stuff. They mostly just got a little shout-out, and that's pretty much it, honestly. But there is actually, however, one moment, or actually a few moments where you subtly see some of the #MeToo movements spreading onto the show itself, like where it did actually get a spotlight. And probably one of the most significant ones is actually what they did for Best Actor and Best Actress. Now, what they did is that they actually broke tradition, considering that Casey Affleck decided to not present for Best Actress since he does have some scandal with sexual harassment accusations from his side. So he decided to walk away from that. So what they did, instead of doing the tradition of having last year's Oscar winner for Best Actor and Actress to present those awards, they actually brought in they actually brought in some veteran actresses. There was for Best Actor, I believe. I forgot. No, for Best Actress, I forgot who it was. I really do apologize. But then you would also have for Best Actor, where they brought in Jennifer Lawrence and Jodie Foster. And honestly, it was actually very interesting seeing them because I didn't, like, honestly, I was a little bit confused about, like, is Jodie Foster really small or is Jennifer Lawrence really tall? Because you do notice that there is a significant height difference right there. But then there is also one other big one that they do brought up the message about the hashtag #MeToo and Time's Up and a little bit more. Actually, it's not really about that, but there is one thing in there, like a little moment where they discussed about equality. And that is probably the most memorable thing from this year's Oscars, where they would go and interview some people and how in this day and age, in this age of cinema, we are starting to see a lot more people that are representing other groups than just straight white males. Where in terms of the stars of the movie and the directors and the writers and some of the positions that people look up to, now they can be represented by minorities, by women, by transgender people, and by anybody. Like, really, now there is a time for minorities to go and, like, they can look up to. And probably the best, like, the two biggest examples that they actually used at this year's Oscars for that little moment, they brought up Wonder Woman and Black Panther, where they mentioned that not too long ago, it would sound insane to have a movie, or a superhero movie for that matter, that would star either an African American or a woman. And yet, here comes Wonder Woman and Black Panther. They dominated the box office. In fact, right now, Black Panther is one of the highest grossing movies ever. Already, as I'm recording this, I wouldn't be surprised right now if it hit $1 billion at the box office. It already crossed 500 million domestically. So from there, they mentioned that when women would watch Wonder Woman, they would feel like this massive connection that they've never felt before when watching movies. Or even with Black Panther, when other African Americans and other minorities, when they would watch Black Panther, they would feel a connection that they've never felt before. And they would say that, man, this is what white guys feel like all the time. And honestly, it really is inspirational seeing that, where there's more different, there are more people that other groups can go and look up to. And for me, as a straight white male, the way that I interpret that for myself is that from what I see right there, that nowadays, when you would watch a movie and you would see a main character in a really good film, then at that point, a lot of the stuff about that main character, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about the character's gender. It doesn't matter about the person's race. It doesn't matter about the character's religion. And it doesn't matter about the character's sexual orientation. Honestly, a great character in a great movie is someone that anyone can feel relatable to. And there are a lot of movies, especially like the ones that are nominated at the Oscars this year, where I know I felt very relatable to, that I can relate strongly to. Like when watching The Shape of Water, even though I'm not a mute woman, I do relate to the main character there. Or even when watching Coco, I'm not a Latino, but I do relate to Miguel. Or even when watching The Breadwinner, I'm not a Muslim, but I do relate to the main character. I think her name is Parvana, I believe, but yeah, I do relate to the main character of the breadwinner. Or when I would watch something like Moonlight, I do relate to the main character despite the fact that I'm not necessarily gay. So that's the thing. Like in this day and age, it really doesn't matter about race, about gender, about sexual orientation, or about religion. At the end of the day, people are people are people. And that's pretty much all that you need to go and relate and to feel empathy for someone else, rather it be in real life or rather it be in fictional. And it really does emphasize the importance of diversity, like the true power of diversity. Even though in that little clip in there, they would only mention about the power of diversity that we are seeing in cinema, but it also highlights the importance of diversity in our culture in general to really reach that equality, to really have that moment to shine, that anybody, literally anybody, can go out and achieve their dreams. And really, like, it really does highlight why diversity is a great thing and why pretty much nationalism is nothing more but a mental illness, which really does explain that when you listen to white nationalists, yeah, they're just crazy. They should never be taken seriously. So really, let nationalism die and let diversity thrive all over the world is pretty much what I got from this and why diversity is such a great thing, really. So overall, it truly is kind of an inspirational moment from the Oscars and pretty much the most memorable moment from there. So it is a beautiful thing to go ahead and check out. And maybe they do have a clip somewhere on YouTube about it, but yeah, if you haven't seen that moment in the Oscars, definitely go see that on YouTube. It really is quite a beautiful thing. And there is one more thing I would like to mention that I honestly was very surprised about, and that is actually the fact that they did bring back the stars of Bonnie and Clyde once again to present for Best Picture, which for me, I do find that was honestly kind of shocking, actually, because I guess they were given a second chance to come back because, yeah, we all remember last year's big incident where the wrong envelope was opened for Best Picture out of all things. So, like, one of the biggest accidents that ever happened in the history of the Oscars. But it is nice that they did come back to, make things up for old times. And they actually did get it right the first try. So that really was nice. So overall, honestly, not the most memorable Oscars. They do have some good highlights, but I will say in terms of the winners, there are some great surprises, and I just want to say congratulations to all the winners at this year's Oscars, and also a major congratulations to the team who worked on Dear Basketball with Glenn Keane, Kobe Bryant, John Williams, and the artists and animators who worked in there. And also for Coco, congratulations to Lee Unkrich, to Adrian Molina, to Robert and Kristen Anderson Lopez, and the entire crew at Pixar for another awesome Oscar win.